name is Pat Goddard. I am the supervisor for the Liaison department at MISDIG 811. I also oversee the submerged facilities, protection of those. And we're at MISDIG, we're in the process of developing a ticket so that we can protect those submerged facilities and make sure that everyone goes home safe at the end of the night, because that's our bottom goal. No matter what we do, is make sure everyone goes home. But on either side of me, I have distinguished guests that are legends in the submerged facility field, and I mean that because they are. And I will let Mr. Ed Landgraf and Mr. Mike DeVonzo introduce themselves, because I'm an excavator. They have earned what their titles are.
All right. Thank you, Pat. Good to be here at MISDIG 811. This is our first time at the office. I mean, what a beautiful place. Y'all have done an awesome job here. And the conference that we're at, also awesome job. Very well received. A lot of great people. But yeah, so thanks for the opportunity. My name is Ed Landgraf. I am the director of a national program called Marine Safe 811. I must say that MISDIG 811 was one of our founding members. Matter of fact, one of the first members of our program, and believed in our vision. And so appreciate your leadership there, and the leadership of your team here. So I'm the director of the national program. It is actually administratively housed under Texas 811, so I do a lot of work with them and a lot of work with other 811 centers across the country. So a little bit of overview of what I do.
Thanks to Pat as well. I like to echo what Ed says. It's great to be here at MISDIG facility. It's really interesting to see the history and how MISDIG evolved, and how much of a difference it's really made. And this has been a great conference, and it's been a really eye opener for me, because it shows me parts of things that I haven't been exposed to yet. I'm Mike DeVonzo. I am a maritime operations specialist for Enbridge. I oversee the Enbridge Maritime Pipeline Protection Program and supervise the Enbridge Straits Maritime Operations Center, where we protect Line 5 from anchor strikes.
And your background's in the Coast Guard.
Yes.
That's where the legend part comes in, right?
Yes. I spent 44 years in the Coast Guard. Out of those 44 years, I had 12 years in the Great Lakes, 8 years on ships, and I spent 6 years working buoys and icebreaking in the Straits of Mackinac. So I was glad to use my experience when Enbridge called. I thought I could use my experience to help protect the pipeline and the Straits.
Gotcha. So thank you for your service. I always tell Mike that to make sure I thank him for his service and that. So I know, Mike, you're a very humble man, so but thanks. So we're here talking about submerged facilities. In Michigan, we have 3,288 miles of coast and 11,000 lakes, inland lakes, riverways, over 54,000 miles of those. Basically, Michigan isn't a piece of land. It's a sponge. We have water everywhere, from swamps, and we have facilities running everywhere also. And again, it's bigger than our national debt, our facilities are. And so what do you do with that? And so, Ed, your experience is, how do you protect those facilities?
Yeah, so, to give you a little context, in 2009, we started seeing in the oil and gas industry damages and strikes on underwater infrastructure, specifically pipelines, where either a spill was occurring, it could be injuries, fatalities, and we started tracking those since 2009 and even before 2009 in some of our case studies. And so we really wanted to, I spent 30 years in the pipeline and oil and gas industry. And so the specific company that I was working for at the time experienced some of these strikes and spills. So the vision was, is this only happening to our company, or is it happening across the industry? And so that was the impetus for us getting other companies together in one room and starting to talk about, is this just happening to one individual company, or is it an industry-wide issue? And at the end of the day, we came up, we're very transparent and said, this is an industry-wide issue. So now what do we want to do about it?
Right.
And so, you work collectively as a whole, establish those goals. And so that's how we started out with our original industry program, which has kept advancing over the years, growing state by state, growing in regions to now our national program that we call Marine Safe 811. So getting to how to protect, right? It's almost like the old adage, you don't know you have a problem if you don't know you have a problem.
Right.
Right. And so, and also engaging those new stakeholder groups that deal in those marine areas. And I'd like to say that in marine areas, we're talking about lakes, bays, creeks, waterways, all the way into the Atlantic and the Pacific and the Gulf of Mexico. So any waterway where you have any types of infrastructure, although we started out with pipeline protection specifically, but we've also added in fiber optic, water, sewer, electrical lines that are also running under waterways. So getting to how to protect, it's just been a learning process and a development over the years, being able to look at the root cause of these things, and then to be able to identify the new stakeholder groups that we need to do outreach and education with. And that's really the key part of what we do with the Marine Safe 811 program is outreach and education. So I know we can dive a little deeper here in a few minutes, but I would say at the end of the day, it is recognizing a stakeholder group that we didn't typically engage through our industries and being able to give them tools for them to work safer.
Gotcha. And that pun was intended, right? Dive
Yes.
deeper. Yep,
Yeah,
I gotcha.
right.
So,
Yep.
So, and then how we started was we had at MISDIG, we had a grant. We recognized that there was, we had situations where with a lot of facilities in the waterways and that, and we ended up having a grant where we started a marine project. And so we started reaching out, and plus in Public Act 174, in the definition of right-of-way is waterway, and then in the definition of facility is submerged. So it's in the law, it's there. So we just need, with the tools were there, but we just need to work on those tools and put them together, because marine excavation is something totally different. And I know, Mike, you've had lots of work around Line 5. And Line 5 also runs through other lakes and swamps and creeks and everything like that too. So we want to make sure we protect all those. But that's what we saw. So, and again, as we were building our program, one of our CEOs at the time, Bruce Campbell, said, reach out to this gentleman named Ed Landgraf. So I reached out to Ed, went down to New Orleans, and we met, and well, it's been pretty good since, right?
It's been very good.
And then Mike worked with Enbridge, reached out to Mike. Actually, I think we first met at Bay College.
Right.
Where there was a presentation there. You did one, and I was right behind you, and it was like, hey, why haven't we talked?
Right.
So what do you, I mean, as far as MISDIG goes with Enbridge and that, trying to protect the lines, because I know this past summer there was a close incident with that I had with some fiber work going on where we had to talk to and make sure and everything. That was more land, but from your point of view, how do you see the work going on in the straits near your facility?
Yeah, well, I think overall from the protection perspective, I think we really start with the why. When I was in the Coast Guard for 44 years, I've connected with the water. The water is part of my life. I'm fortunate enough to live on the straits, and I see the water. I'm not sure I could live if it wasn't around the water. And I know when my granddaughter comes, she gets out of that car, she runs down to the water. First thing she does, turns over rocks, looks for crayfish or whatever. And, it really struck me that it's my responsibility to protect the water, not only for my granddaughter, but also for future generations. And I think what happens, the folks that work with us in the operations center, we all share that common value, that common sense of purpose and commitment to protecting the straits. So we're out watching the water 24/7. We have, as we have that great technology that allows us to give a really good look across the whole Straits of Mackinac. So just by watching the water around the pipeline and the adjacent water in the Straits, we kind of give a good overview of all the water in the Straits of Mackinac and consequently the Great Lakes.
Gotcha. So, again, you had a relationship with Maritime. Ed, how did you start? With how did you get into the submerged part of it, the water part of it?
Oh, yeah, very very good question. So I was with a private oil company at the time, and I was in charge of doing root cause analysis and investigations on spills, whether they were on land, in our facilities, or in this case, in marine environments. So when I was doing those root cause analysis, I started seeing a trend of damages in waterways to the infrastructure, and actually that was the spark, let's say that led us to design this program initially back in 2009. So, but to your point is the work in the waterways, this was a stakeholder group that we had not identified, right? These mariners, the marine construction, dredging industry, we had never had any outreach to those people. And it's unfortunate because at the end of the day, those are the people who have, that are working on the waterways that need to be protected, right? And so it's mutual. We want to educate you on the hazards and the risk. We want to educate you on how to do your job more safely so you can go home at the end of the day, right? Or not cause a spill, right? So at the end of the day, right, we have three priorities is protect lives, protect the environment, and protect infrastructure. It's pretty much that simple. And that's our challenge is how to make all three of those work together. So that was through incidents, root cause analysis, understanding the connection between these different accidents that have happened is really how we got started.
Okay, and that just took off from there and it's grown and grown.
It just took off from there. We started small. We got other companies together, and then we were also able to get some grant money, and we have a membership, membership in Marine Safe 811 like you guys are. And what was also our Coastal and Marine Operators, our CAMO initiative, right? So we've just been growing and growing. And at the end of the day, the stakeholder group that we haven't engaged before, we have really made great strides over the past really 10 years with outreach with the dredge and marine construction. And they love it. They're like, hey, we want to be safe. We don't want to cause a spill. We don't want to damage your infrastructure either.
Right.
So at the end of the day, so now it's incumbent upon us to give them tools on how to stay safe.
Right.
Right.
Gotcha. Yep.
And take their feedback and say, okay, so what do you need? How can we help you help yourself be more safe?
Gotcha. And then how I started was grew up on Lake Michigan on Little Baby Knock. My dad was a Navy diver, master diver. So we learned we were swimming before we walked. So we had to live near water, according to him. And then he became a police officer, started a dive rescue team, and then also did side jobs. He actually worked on some pipelines up in our area for some of the paper mills and that. And so when our CEO at the time said, do you want to take the marine thing, the marine project? And I jumped at it because it's like, okay, this is right up my alley. Yeah. So that's all. And then we got to meet each other. And then, as you mentioned with the tools, we have the tools to put in place. But from my expertise, like I said, I started out as an excavator, but from Mike's expertise in the field too, is there's more I can learn from Mike. Because maybe there's things I'm missing, and that's, again, reaching out to Ed. Things I'm not the expert, but things that we're missing. We know we need a design period before a marine ticket's placed because of the process. You want to describe the process and how it goes, and then how you guys deal with someone placed and working near your facilities?
Yeah. So as far as the process, and again, this has been an education for myself and all of our members, right? To be able to empathize with another industry group and their challenge and help them execute their projects more successfully. And so I really need to be humble in that way to say, there's just a lot of things that we didn't know about that industry. And there's a lot of things that we need to just sit back and listen and understand what they needed. And you need to know that if you do any type of a waterway project, it takes far more advanced planning than you typically would on land, just because of the logistics, just because of the type of work, the complexity of the work. On land, you can actually excavate and you can actually expose a line or a utility, pipeline, cable line, whatever it is. You can't expose these things underwater where you can actually see them and do a visual. And people in excavation often talk about probing. It's hard to probe in a waterway to know exactly where that line is. And this all leads up to answering your question of advanced planning, right? And so depending on the type of project, you may be needing to plan these things 3, 4, 5 months or even a year out to be able to understand the entire scope of your project and how you may be impacting underwater infrastructure, and then setting up those mitigation plans. And then being able to communicate with those infrastructure owners to be able to get the right-of-way agreements, encroachment agreements in place, and understand what their requirements are to work around their line, whatever it is. So advanced planning, right, is really, really key. I'd say the two biggest things is advanced planning far in advance of your project and communication. And so, Mike?
Right. And I think communication is the key. So like when we do work in the straits, we let the Coast Guard know, we talk to the waterway users. And then, in past years, we had Cozing was doing some work on the ATC transmission cable, which is just to the west of our line. So what we used to do is have these coordination meetings where we get all the key stakeholders and we would tell what we're going to be doing for the day, where we're going to be working. We were able to deconflict if we were ever in the same space together, but it was just that general awareness. And I think we do a lot of outreach to the waterway users. Like we attended the Lake Carriers Association Cabinet Committee meeting last week. We go to the International Shipmasters folks and we talk to them and explain to them what we're doing and the purpose behind our pipeline protection program. So I think everything Ed said is, I think the key really is that communication and that relationship with the planning. And you got to be willing to share your plans. Because Ed, from my time in the Coast Guard, is not everybody knows where that underwater infrastructure is. And if it's not communicated, that's when you wind up running into problems because they're either dredging or working on top of your pipeline because they're not really aware of where it's at.
Right, and that's what we ran into in Michigan early in the program. Was people would think they could excavate the same way they do on land. I'll place my ticket; they'll mark it in 3 days, which we all know it's not being marked in 3 days, right? It's just impossible. And so they would be, okay, here's our dig start date. They would show up at the job site with their equipment and then say, how come it's not marked? They were just fully expecting everything to be marked. It was simple peasy, easy peasy like that. And then they found out that, no, there's going to be a much bigger process. So this is where I had to learn from gentlemen like on my left and my right, from Mike and Ed, that, okay, what is the process? And then also have those connections, Mike with the Coast Guard and Ed with all the different pipelines that we have in our meetings and that, all the different carriers and that. But again, it's a learning process, an education process, and through that education, as we're all saying, is communication. The more communication, the more education. So that's where we have to learn. So from where do we go from here? Like for Michigan, what do you think? Where do we go from here?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Pat. And maybe I would like to back up just a little bit.
Sure.
And in 2020, we had a very unfortunate accident that had 5 fatalities where a marine construction dredge project was going on. A propane line was hit. Unfortunately, 5 people lost their lives in Texas. And this sent shockwaves through that marine construction and dredge industry. And so since 2020, we've really tried to sharpen our pencil in what we want to do and where we want to go collectively as an industry, dredge and marine construction, pipeline and utilities, and the 811 centers. So all trying to work together, trying to empathize with each other's challenges, trying to figure out how we can capitalize on those opportunities to be better, right? And so I think we've always had a good program, but it's got to be evergreen. You can't be complacent, right? And so after that event, the National Transportation Safety Board issued recommendations. One of those was to my group. One of them was to the dredge and marine construction industry, and one of them was actually to the pipeline regulator. So, so 2 things that we did there that has really helped our industry is we have updated our online training. That, by the way, is totally free. It's in English and Spanish. And the other main thing was we came out with our updated and revised best practices. And if we're on the video here, this is our best practice guideline that was just produced late last year, working safely near underwater pipelines and utilities. So this was a recommendation put forth to us by the National Transportation Safety Board. And so I think one of the goals is to be able to make people aware of our best practices that are out there and understand that there's also online training that you can take as well, right, in English and Spanish, and being able to integrate that with your stakeholders. So I think as far as what Ms. Digg could do and is already doing is just continue that outreach. Identify your stakeholder groups who need to get this information and, you know, make resources available and be transparent. Not that you're not, but being able to open yourselves up for questions and challenges, because this industry, who we haven't engaged, they don't necessarily know who to call when they have questions. And so it's going back to what Mike said about the communication. Pat, what you guys do an excellent job of is education, and there's always somebody to reach, right? People are always coming into these industries.
Right.
So I would say that, you know, hey, you know, we gotta keep pushing the bar always.
Gotcha.
And you know, I would just add this is I think that, you know, was a great conference, and like I said, I learned a lot. And there's a lot of awareness, but I think if you do this again next year, you really have to target those marine excavators, because there's, you know, in the waterways here, especially after, like I would think after this ice season, we may see a lot of docks and other structures damaged by the ice.
Good point.
And there'd be a lot of marine construction going on. And, you know, I think we spoke to a woman who was one of the vendors there, and, you know, we kind of exposed her to the marine construction world. She was unaware of that group, and I think that if there's a way that you could attract those people here, you know, there would be a lot of value, because I think, you know, that's how you grow Miss Digg, and I think it grows that awareness. And then I think that in these conferences, if you take Ed's book and maybe have a session on the stuff that's in that book, and you know, like when we first met Ed, we sat down at the computer screen. We did all the drop-down menus, and because the resources are there, we just now have to make the people aware of them.
Right. Yeah, put the tools, give them the tools now.
Right,
yeah. And that's what we're looking at here at Miss Digg is, again, we have the design ticket. We have the proper ticket, and we have a 180-day ticket, which is a very long, 6 months for a marine project, because they're always going to take longer.
Right.
And so we have the tools. We just have to put them together and then get the education out to them. And again, have it in the law, and we need to add it'd be nice to have dredging as part of excavation. That's something we have to work at too, so we can hit them. But as far as the future goes too, can we give it away to what we're working on at the CEGA, the RC?
Oh, yeah.
Can we talk about our top secret program?
Yeah, right. Yeah. So So nationally, if you're in the excavation community nationally, there is an organization that you may have heard of. If you haven't, it's called CGA. It stands for Common Ground Alliance. They put out a CGA best practices for excavation. It's basically what I call the Bible for 811 excavation practices and safety practices. But it's largely devoid of any type of underwater excavation. And so what we're doing is we're taking our best practices, which has been nationally recognized, approved by regulators, the pipeline and utility industry, and the dredge and marine construction industry jointly. And that's what's so nice about this best practice. And we're taking the highlights out of this and slowly incorporating them into the Common Ground Alliance best practice manual. Again, to get that education out there. And I would say that, and we talked about this a little bit before. Let's say you're an on-land excavator. You may not have any interaction on your project with a waterway, but at the end of the day, if you cause some kind of release or a spill, right, and there's so many waterways here in the state of Michigan that the probability of that spill finding its way to a waterway is huge, right? Very high. So although you might be an on-land quote unquote excavator, and you might think, well, I don't do anything with waterways. You could impact a waterway. And by understanding that awareness of that risk potential there is some things in our best practices that you would need to know, right, about how to limit that exposure. So my message to those traditional on-land only excavators is understand where those waterways are near your project, and there's some extra precautions you need to take.
And it's not a joke, but it will be Chapter 11, right. In the book. So
right, yeah. So back to the CGA, we're trying to work on a Chapter 11. We are getting content approved. Every 6 months, we get just a little snippet approved. It's a very rigorous process to try to get things into this National Common Ground Alliance publication. And don't get me wrong, our best practices and our program, it is nationally available. It's just this is another avenue of an established best practice guideline that's been around for over 20 years, and we are incorporating major parts of our best practices into that. Yep.
Perfect. Nice. So I know we talked about how we all started, how we all met, and where we're moving, where we are right now with submerged facilities, and where we're moving with it. But what do you have for a good story?
Yeah. So
and you're next. So think of one.
Good story. Let's see. So there's so many of them, but there is some stories. One specifically that through our outreach really is what we call a near miss in our industry, something that almost happened but didn't. This was in the Houston, Texas area on the Houston Ship Channel, one of the busiest ports, or the busiest port in the nation, as far as the tonnage, that moves in and out of there. But there was a tugboat captain that was operating barges in and out of an area. And because of our outreach and awareness, he made a call to his supervisors and said, I think I hit something in the water. And his supervisor said, well, were you touching the water bottom? Where he said, no, I was above the water, right? I wasn't, my prop in the bottom of my boat wasn't on the water bottom itself. He said, I'm hitting something that's a little ways off the water bottom, and I don't know what it is. And he said, I looked over, and on the banks, I saw some pipeline markers and thought, oh my, I wonder if this is a pipeline that has been exposed that I'm hitting. And this transit area. Matter of fact, it was hit a couple of times. We later found out. But at the end of the day, his awareness was such that he said if we didn't have that education and outreach and how to look for pipeline markers and identify things, we would have probably never made this call, and we would have thought that we were just hitting a tree stump on the water bottom. But they were proactive. They called me. I looked it up, and we found where a pipeline had become exposed, and they were hitting that line when they were crossing over it. And so very significant near miss. There was a couple of pipelines in that area. One was actually a little ways suspended above the water bottom. Another one was just below the mud line, just below the water bottom. But both of them had strike marks on them. And one of the things that we also try to educate people on is tide ranges, right? When the tides go up, the tides go down, the draft of these vessels are the same. So if the tide's down and the draft of a vessel is 6, 7, 8 feet or more, it's going to go down with the tide. So you're closer to that infrastructure, and that's something you wouldn't typically have to deal with on land.
Right.
So a success story, knock on wood, is their awareness was there to make a call, see something, say something doesn't feel right. And, that's one thing attributed to our education and outreach that, hey, hopefully we play a small role in saving somebody's life or preventing a spill and preventing infrastructure downtime.
Gotcha. How about you? You have to have some good ones, Mike.
I have some that are appropriate for this forum. But, I'm going to take first, I just want to take the advantage to, just talk about, you all seen our technology. Our technology is state of the art, fantastic, but none of it works without our people.
Right.
We are really blessed with good people. They all have that same sense of purpose, commitment, and deep passion for protecting the straits, and that's really what makes my job so rewarding, is just being able to go there and work with those folks. But one of the stories I'll just share with you is we do a lot of outreaches, and we bring in a lot of the emergency managers from Mackinac County, Sheboygan County, Emmett County. We've had the Coast Guard there, and now what we've become a force multiplier in the straits. So, in addition to our everyday job of protecting the pipeline, we're also able to help the community. So if they have a emergency situation, say a boater is overdue, well, they could call us, and they do, and we use our cameras, and we could quickly search a lot of the area. We could really help them optimize their resources. We're always listening to the radio. The Coast Guard might do a broadcast, like they did a broadcast one time for an overdue sailboat. We were able to use our cameras, and we found the sailboat underneath the Mackinac Bridge, called it in, resolved the case. We had this call into the Mackinac County about a person in the water, overturned boat. They called us up. We were able to use our cameras. I watched there and identified it as somebody who was swimming to practice for the race across the straits,
Okay.
and the boat next to it was his chase boat. So they have come to rely on us, the community. So I think that really one of the successes is we are part of the community, and we become a force multiplier in the straits.
Nice. Nice. One of mine is, it's a little comical, but it was early when we first started the Marine. And we've always got the calls where, hey, our dig start dates come and we don't know what to do. So I went down to, and I won't give away names or where it was. We want to protect the innocent here. We needed some education, but it was across a river. They were doing some work, and they had tied a line of from one end to the other end with some buoys on it. And they apparently weren't very good Boy Scouts, because that line had come untied, and that line started going down the river. And so it happened just when I got there. So it was, I think you guys are losing your facility because it's floating down the river if you tie it to it. So, but that was my one comical thing. But, from everything that we've done so far and talked about, how would you like to, close our podcast out today?
Yeah. So a couple of things, right, is number one, Marine Safe 811 does not take tickets. it educates you on the information that you need to put on a ticket, no matter what state you're in. You go to our website. You can point to the state that you're doing the work in. It goes into MISDIG or Illinois or Texas, Florida, wherever, right? And so that's very important, right? It does not take tickets, but we're leveraging the whole 811 national message in Marine Safe 811 as a resource, right? You can come here to our website. You can go on. You can download our best practice manual. It also has a checklist in here, right? At the back of the best practice manual, there's a checklist. It's also on our website along with that training. marinesafe811.org. And so, look, advance notice, right? Understand a couple of key things here is we recommend a 75-foot tolerance zone on each side of the line in marine areas, right? It doesn't mean you can't work within that 75 feet, but it just means you need to have further communication, documented communication with that utility or pipeline owner to be able to work within that 75 feet on either side of the line. We also try to tell people make that 811 notification 7 days in advance, right? A minimum of 7 days. If it's a large project, look further out and identify those lines that you need to have that direct communication with in the project design. So I would probably say, and then just communicate, right? Over communicate. Participate in the construction meetings that they have. Pre-construction, pre-design meetings are very important to participate in. So that's what I want to relay, some of those key points. There's a resource here. Pat, you're a great resource for MISDIG. You've really helped us advance our program nationally with your leadership here at MISDIG and some of your examples, right? We've used those nationally, and you've had a lot of input on our best practices as well. So, marinesafe811.org. Definitely get with Pat. You can also get with myself, or even Mike. I mean, we're all out here because we want to be safe. We want to save lives, prevent injuries, protect the environment, and then protect infrastructure.
How would you like to wrap it up, Mike?
I'd wrap it up by saying I think all of us have the same common goals and common vision, and I think the opportunity to work together has really made a big difference. And I think, as Ed said, it's about getting out, making people aware, educate people. That's really critical to the success of it. And I'm just grateful that Enbridge and myself could be part of the process. And always, if you're in the St. Ignace area, please stop by. We'd like to show you our technology, show you what we're doing. And I think educating the people is really the key. And
Right.
I'm so grateful to be part of it.
Gotcha. And I'd like to say the same thing, communication, education. But I'd like to thank Ed and Mike. Like I said, I'm just an excavator. You guys are the experts. Your contacts have been invaluable to us here at MISDIG 811. And it's just growing and growing. And we're getting to the point where this year we will have that marine ticket. It's something I didn't realize starting this out is that it takes time. It's not just turn on the switch and here we go. We got a new program, but it takes time to learn everything, get the connections that you need to have from people and organizations. Organizations is a big one, meeting those, and through you, I'd like to thank you for those contacts and your help in those areas. So invaluable to us. So thank you.
Yes.
Thanks, Ed. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks.
And like I said, we'll continue this, and in next year we'll plan some more and get more people involved in this, and we'll just keep growing it and get the message out there. So thanks. We did pretty good, didn't we, Jeff? You don't have to edit a thing, and you can leave that in if you want.
Say, can you take a picture of us while we're got all our gear on here? Like maybe from back there.